I'm sorry that the non-taller was so inaudible, but I hope you got a little taste of what he's like, because true Dominicans. And what he said really helps to understand especially the transition from the illuminative way to the unitive way. And that's kind of what been talking about both there. Because he's talking to these contemplative Dominican nuns. So normally that a lot of, well, some of them at least are up at that altitude. But it's good to listen to that altitude, even if we're not there. Remember, I think I told you, St. Teresa of Avila talks about in this castle where God is in the most interior room, and you start at the outside and try to get more and more interior. She says the way you do that is by frequenting people who are more interior in the interior rooms. So by listening to something like that, it helps us give us an idea, what's in there anyway. Even if we don't understand maybe exactly what he's talking about. But he's very good for that, because he gives all these images, and as I said, he's talking to these nuns, so he's not going to just give a theological discourse. He gives all these funny stories about, this woman with her coin and throwing things all over the place. So I hope you got the part of the idea of these retreats is to give you pistes, they say in French. Piste is like a track, trail, like something that you could follow up after. So hopefully some of you have got the consent of the tour, and you will go on find it, because he's really worth it. He wrote a whole book of meditations on the Passion. Well, and so did Father Chardon. Have I ever talked about Father Chardon with you? Well, there's a book actually that's been translated in English, very slow, called The Cross of Jesus. Louis. He was a Dominican. Maybe early some days ago. I read myself. It's a classic book, but it knows about Chardon, of course. But he has a whole series, like for every day of the year, 365 meditations on passion that he did for some noble lady, princess of some sort, Ferris. And I actually translated 200 and something already. And someday maybe it'll be published. It's not easy to translate that. Anyway. So we'll finish the instructions on mental prayer with the difficulties, because prayer is difficult, as anybody knows who's tried to do it. If you quoted Father Cyprian to you about Carmelites, you have to be a bulldozer. And in general, you have to do mental prayer regularly, you do have to have certain strength. It's not easy because it's going uphill. You're in the spiritual register. So it's not easy. St. Teresa of Avila experienced very great difficulty in prayer. She writes, very often during a period that lasted several years, I was much more worried about seeing the hour of prayer finish and to hear the clock ring than I was about other thoughts which were truly useful. Often also it would have been easier for me to endure the most rigorous penances than to recollect myself in order to do mental prayer. A so great sadness came over me when I entered the chapel that in order to be victorious over myself, I needed every bit of my strength of soul, which is not small, as I have been told. I told you that before, right? She's considered to be one of the greatest men of the 16th century. And she is. Read her life, it's really worth it. But she, for 20 years, she was, well, she wasn't St. Teresa. She was this rather worldly nun. I mean, not scandalous, but, not St. Teresa yet. So I mustn't be surprised then if we have difficulties in prayer. Father Marie-Eugène, the Carmelite that I quoted earlier, gives a list of 5 reasons why prayer can be difficult. The first one, and probably the fundamental one, that we've already talked about, is the supernatural character of the theological virtues. Because God, as he is the supernatural object of this theological virtue, infinitely surpasses all of creation, even the highest angels. Right? So, we're like the monkey trying to play the piano on our own strength. I mean, that we need grace to pray. It's impossible without it. And that's why, generally it's something that people do who are in the state of grace. You almost have to be in the state of grace to do prayer, mental prayer. But it is a way of getting into the state of grace, I suppose. But normally it doesn't work that way. It's still, you get in a state of grace some other way. And the way to grow in grace is mental prayer. So this contact that we have with God in mental prayer is difficult. Could we quote that? Yeah. I guess. Oh, there it is. Okay. So that's why it takes a great strength of soul, like St. Teresa. But it's worth it, all this effort, because this contact with God that you have through mental prayer, even if it's painful at times, elevates and enriches us. So as St. John the Cross says, that is where God enlightens my spirit, makes me share in his celestial wisdom, and gives me his heart. That is where God enlightens my spirit, makes me share in his celestial wisdom, and gives me his heart. And Father Marie-Eugène writes, just as one cannot plunge one's hand in water without getting wet, or in fire without getting burnt, similarly, one cannot enter into contact with God by faith without receiving something from his infinite riches. Just remember, he talks about that. That's what prayer really is. It's this contact with God, supernatural contact with God. He compares it to plunging your hand in water or in fire. The founder of the Capuchins in Morgon, the district Capuchins in France, used to say, we suffer during prayer, but God works on us during it. That's where he works on us during prayer. See, that's sort of what John Toller was saying about, the difference between God searching you and you searching God. I mean, when God begins to search you, that's the passing of prayer, you see. And in prayer, God works on us. Now, often this contact with God gives the impression of emptiness. But that's completely normal because it's a contact that's supernatural through the intermediary of faith, which is necessarily obscure. And you don't feel anything. You probably heard this definition of St. Denis the Areopagite. The supernatural light of contemplation is a ray of darkness. Okay. A ray of darkness, which is crazy. But in order to truly know and love God, it's necessary to go by that road. See, because he's not something you can taste or feel or even know. He's beyond. Because, as I said, he's given us this supernatural destiny. And the only way to get there is to let him take us. And that's why Satan refused. Remember I told you about that, right? That's the first thing. See, Thomas, that was the cause, the motive of the fall of the angels was they refused the supernatural beatitude that God in his infinite generosity and goodness offered to his intellectual creatures. And they said, no thanks, have me excused. Because they would have to perceive it humbly from him. I mean, God is as dark to them as he is to us. With their super duper seraphic intelligences, doesn't matter. They're just as stupid as we are on that level. And that's a humiliation. And they didn't. They refused it. And it's kind of the same thing whenever we try to pray. It's a humiliation because we just, it surpasses us. We're just left with our hands empty. As St. John of the Cross says, the only adequate means to unite oneself to God is faith, which is dark. Okay, so that's the first reason why prayer, mental prayer is difficult. Second reason that Father Martin gives for difficulties during prayer is the instability of the faculties of the soul. I mean, you can make the effort of recollecting yourself and recollecting these powers of our soul, but they immediately regain their independence as soon as you let go a little. And the solution is simply to apply oneself with patience and perseverance to disciplining these powers of our soul. They're like children in their desks at school. You must discipline them, and they end up finally obeying, at least for a while. St. Teresa of Avila says, by the love of God, I conjure you, my sisters, to look at all the efforts you employ for this as well spent. I know that if you apply yourself to this, you will, with the help of God, succeed within a year, perhaps even less, perhaps even after 6 months. To recollect yourself. Thus one gets to the point, she says, that as soon as the will manifests that it wants to recollect the faculties, the senses obey and retreat into the sanctuary of the soul. They will come out again, she says, like children, but it's already quite something that they obey. Now see, John Toller gives a comparison here. Oh, where'd he go? My John. Oh, there it is. Is that it? Yeah. I have watched the mining for silver when the water has accumulated so that they could not get at the ore. It's caverns, so the ore it's filled with water. So what are you going to do to get at the silver that's there? A skillful miner knows how to drain the water off so that he can find the precious metal which will repay all his labor and bring him great profit. This is what you must do too. Be patient. Endure all these obsessions, these images of created things, these worrisome defects which you have to suffer against your will and contrary to your dispositions, all these distractions and everything. They will all drain away. But just be patient, like the miner. All your labor will be repaid, and you will draw great profit from it all. Interesting analogy. So those are the two major difficulties: the supernatural character of prayer and the instability of the faculties. But we can look briefly at the others. The third one is illness. Generally, one must be in good health to pray, at least in the sense in which we've been speaking here, this mental prayer. Nevertheless, it's not absolutely necessary, as the following example in the life of St. Teresa the Child Jesus shows. Her sister Celine, with Sister Genevieve in the Carmel, recounts the following incident that occurred only some days before the death of St. Teresa. I got up several times every night to check on her, in spite of her insisting that I not do so. One time, when I came to visit, I found my dear little sister with her hands joined and her eyes lifted toward heaven. "Why are you doing that?" I said to her. "You should try to sleep." "I can't," answered Therese. "I'm suffering too much, so I'm praying." "And what are you saying to Jesus?" Because remember, that's what prayer is, talking to Jesus. Okay, so praying, what are you saying to Jesus? "I don't say anything to him. I love him." So that's prayer. Okay. I guess I'm making up its great discourses. And you can do that even if you're sick. The fourth difficulty is the devil. Obviously, he doesn't want us to do mental prayer. I mean, St. John Ross talks in great detail about that. But, in the higher stages of prayer, the devil will do anything when he sees you're getting close to divine union to just, and make noises and like physically, just to stop you from, getting there. Even it's really going to be a trouble. It doesn't go very far. Listen to what St. Therese of Avila says. "Sometimes it seemed to me that the demons were amusing themselves by throwing my soul back and forth like a ball." And it's funny, if you read her life, she talks about these different things that the devil would do, but she got to the point where she would just make fun of him. And then different saints, that's what it gets to. And she talks about it, he really is despicable. I mean, there's nothing he can do. He's just he's just a liar. He's trying to frighten you, but there's nothing he can do if you're not to God. I remember St. Therese talks about when she's a little child. Remember that? Where she's in the garden and she saw these devils. And just being a little child, she just looked at them and they ran away. And they terrified. Because she's in a state of grace, well, she's St. Teresa. John Jesus, okay, I mean. But it's people who are generous, then they have power, okay. Another example reported by Celine shows how her sister also had this difficulty in mental prayer because of the devil. "Getting up early in the morning, I found my dear little sister pale and disfigured by suffering and anguish. She said to me, 'The devil is around me. I don't see him, but I sense him. He is tormenting me, holding me with an iron hand in order to stop me from having the least bit of relief. He increases my suffering in order to make me despair. And I can't pray. All I can do is look at the Blessed Virgin and say, Jesus.' Extremely shaken by these words, I lit a blessed candle, and a little after that, she became calm." Now, the reason for these attacks, obviously, is that the saints do the devils a lot of harm. And so especially if we give ourselves to God. Again, to quote Father Eugene Capuchin, you spend all your time breaking sugar cubes on the head of the devil and you expect him to leave you in peace? Strange expression. Of course, we're enemies, right? So he's going to attack us. Normal. I'd be surprised about it. Finally, the fifth cause of this difficulty is the permission of God. He allows us for his reasons. Because this dryness that he allows, difficulty in prayer, can be a purification sent from God to prepare the soul to ascend higher in prayer and dispose it to receive contemplation that we've been talking about. Because there has to be dryness in our sensitivity so that we can be raised up to the spiritual level, which is what precisely the difference between meditation and contemplation is. It's the passage from the senses to the spirit. So it has to be difficult. As I explained before, with St. Bernard, he says, God gives us these sensible consolations to draw us from the world, but then he has to take away those consolations so that we can be brought up to the spiritual level. Those sensible consolations, and he had to give us to draw us from the sensible consolations of the world, now have to go so that we can be lifted up to the spirit. And it's hard. That's the difficulty. And St. John of the Cross even says that it's according to the degree of prayer more or less elevated that God wishes to raise us, that he gives us dryness that is more or less difficult. It's the higher he wants to take us, the drier we're going to feel. But he says, this is the beautiful. Read St. John of the Cross. Don't be afraid. Because he has this bad reputation. It's sort of like St. Dominic, in France, especially talking St. Dominic, this terrible, murderer of heretics and all that. That's what they really think of that. Inquisitor guy. And it's the same thing with St. John of the Cross. A lot of people do that to him. And when you read him, you can maybe get, because he can be very severe, right? Like in these, it's I was telling you, and his mother lives right beside him, and his brother works with him, and so you got to be careful. It says, don't take him literally. And he can be very, very tender. And if you read his life, he wants that way, with the sisters, confessors, and be very, very loving. But he does have this sort of side that's, severe. Because it's true that senses has to be annihilated, and so he does. But he writes, never give up prayer. That's a temptation, right? But don't do it. Never give up prayer. And should you find dryness and difficulty, persevere in it for this very reason. Adjure contra. That's what St. Ignatius, that was his big phrase, right? Adjure contra. And they say he in his exercises, he says, when you feel, tempted to give up, or shorten your prayer because it seems difficult, do 5 minutes more. Okay. So persevere in prayer for this very reason, that it's dry, difficult. God often desires to see what love your soul has. Often desires to see what love your soul has. And love is not tried by ease and satisfaction. Okay. It's not going to see. Unless You go through some trial. One thing, especially, people who live in the world, it's maybe good to know is rest in God on Sunday. That's what it's for. St. Thomas says it's beautiful. Well, he has a whole question or something about the commandment to rest on Sunday, right? The third commandment. I know my commandment's very bad. It's the third one. It's up there. And you notice how in Genesis, it doesn't say that God rested in his works, but from his works on the seventh day. He didn't rest in, I'm kind of shot back on the wall. Look what I did. It's pretty good. Huh? It's like Kurt Vonnegut. So, big deal. Rotary Club, president. The whole universe. Nothing compared to him. He rests in himself, not in his works. And that's what Sunday's for. Literally. That's why it exists. That's why it's like that. Because we need it. We can see it now. And what happens with people when they don't rest on Sunday? You just get completely swamped by the world. And you forget what you were made for. It's made to rest in God. Subratsoni deitatis. As he is in himself. Not in his works. I mean, that doesn't mean, okay, I'm not eating, you can't anything else on Sunday, but just praise him. You have to rest. But rest, rest in God. Remember that part. It's a time for prayer. It's not, just a time. I don't go see people or things like that. Family time. Well, yeah, it is, but it should be a family time also with, God. It should be a time for prayer, family prayer. At least, be sure at least then you say the rosary together or something, that's because what Sunday's for. It's on purpose. A little bit quicker than I thought. I'm going to read to finish this whole thing on prayer. A text. Don Lemonnier, you've heard of him? I probably haven't. I don't know if there's any. He's been translated into English. Must be something. That's what I'll do when I get too old to do it, The French, they've got. And the Earth and Jolly, that the council. Actually. And he wrote all these books for contemplative nuns, again, like John Tull. And those who know French, you ever heard of them? No. No, you have, of course. It's really, really worth reading. And they're not hard. Again, it's like Toller. It's written for these religious nuns, and they're not great theologians. So it's quite simple. And yet it's really deep. And, he has books, all sorts of books. It's all usually about the Bible. There's one that patriarchs, there's one on David, and there's one on Cana, for example, beautiful. It's just a little book about the wedding of Cana. It's a beautiful, beautiful meditation. And he also wrote a book on Christ the King. A beautiful book. And, contra against the whole, Vatican II, before Vatican II ever happened. Wait a minute. Huh. This is in French. I have to translate it. I've got it somewhere. Wait a minute. Listen, 1 minute. I've got it. Okay. That's one good thing about computers. You've got everything right at your fingertips. I remember Father Wegener, he didn't have any books. I'm sure when he went back to Europe, he just took his computer. Okay, here it is. There it is, Christ the King. Here it is, okay. So in this book, he talks about the three titles to kingship that our Lord has. The three reasons why he deserves to be king. First of all, because he alone can bring peace to the world, to the justice he gives to men by his grace. He's king of our intelligences because he alone can bring us to know the truth, because he is the truth. But finally, and this is the one that interests us, he is king of our hearts because he alone can make us love God, who is all our happiness. So that's what prayer we've been talking about is all about. We saw, right? It's based on this. It's a commerce of friendship with God. That's what prayer is, essentially. So it's based on the love of God. So that's, he's going to, and that's the most important title or basis of the kingship of our Lord is love for us. And because he alone can make us love God, who is, and that's what our happiness is to love God, right? That's what St. Thomas said. Charity is the form of all the other virtues, because charity is what unites us to God, and that's our end. And all the other virtues fit into charity. It has to animate them. That's the reason why we have all the other virtues, so that we can love God, who is all our happiness. So he explains, to finish his book on Christ the King, he talks about this love of God that the second person of the Blessed Trinity came to earth to give us, because that's our happiness, is to love God. He had to come and make us love God. That's the purpose of his mission. Okay. That's came to give us the attitude. That's what the attitude is, to love God. So he came to do that, to make us love God. So he explains how. And he quotes Pius XI in his encyclical on Christ the King, Quas Primas. No one in the history of the human race has ever been loved or ever will be loved like Jesus Christ. And Don Demoniol writes, by this incredible abnegation of his death on the cross, he obtained what he was looking for. He had said to his disciples, when I shall be lifted up from the earth, I will draw all things to myself. This prophecy has been fully realized. From the height of his gibbet, he began to exercise upon all humanity an extraordinary attraction. I will draw all things to myself. Lord, said the Pharisees to Pilate, in order to obtain from him the body of their victim. We recall that the seducer affirmed while he was still living, etc. This seducer, yes, they didn't realize how fully they spoke. Who indeed has ever exercised upon the world a seductive power comparable to that of Jesus Christ? Who has known how to charm men as he has, to the point of making them leave everything, despise everything, in order to follow him? From the apostles and the disciples, by thousands, they've left their homes, their parents. For him, the apostles and the disciples, by thousands, have left their home, their parents, have crossed the seas and run towards death. For him, the deserts have been peopled with permanents. For him, senators have become slaves, kings have become monks, mothers have abandoned their children. St. John, that sort of the what her son placed himself, laid it down before the threshold. For him, numerous multitudes of martyrs have endured the most cruel torments and confronted joyously death under all its forms. For him, the young girls of the highest nobility at Rome, the flower of ancient civilization, renounced the luxurious life that opened before them, and brave persecution, running to their torture as if to their wedding. This attraction continues down through the centuries. All generations pay their tribute to this love. The cross, always there, upright, makes its silent call heard. It doesn't fast a single year, a single month, a single day. It doesn't see, as at the time of the apostles, men, women, young men and girls leave everything they hold most dear on earth in order to go away. One behind the walls of the cloister, the other on the other side of the oceans, in order to follow Jesus Christ. And besides all these examples of absolute mouse-led, the immense multitude of Christians never cease to give to the Divine Master proofs of their affection. No human intelligence could ever count, each day, the number of alms given, poor were comforted, sick assisted, sacrifice accomplished, sufferings accepted, offenses pardoned, with the love of Jesus Christ. It is for this reason that he merits to be called the King of all hearts. By the splendor of the divine perfections that shine in his person, by the elevation of his doctrine, by the sweetness and humility of his life, by the generosity of his sacrifice, he has forced the heart of man. He has constrained this hard, perverse heart to give in and let itself be enchained. Thou hast seduced me, Lord, said already the prophet Jeremiah, and I mistake. Thou hast been stronger than I, and thou hast won. That's not perfect. Oh, for Jesus Christ. St. Teresa of Avila insists on, right? Past humanity of our Lord.